Hi, my name is Emily Gottshall. You can call me Mrs. Gottshall or Mrs. G. I'm going to be teaching you today about oil pastel. And we are going to be learning about different ways that we can do this and different techniques like blending, adding color onto different surfaces, primarily watercolor. And we're going to be using a reference photo. So if you would like to use the animal of your choice would be great. A flower or a different type of plant that you would like to use is wonderful. For my project, I'm going to be using this one about birds. I'll show you that. And I just have this little picture of a bird on the cover. And I'm going to be using that as my reference photo. You don't have to use the same one. You can find whatever one that is appealing to you. So materials you're going to be using for this project, you're going to be using oil pastels. I have a kit here, and I'll show you that, called Expressions. You don't have to use the same brand. Any brand will do. This one comes with a whole bunch of different colors. So I have more than the usual 12. I have quite a few more. So I have different colors in here, and I have a mixture. So if you want to use different kinds, that's fine too. Also, you'll be using a pencil. I would suggest using an HB pencil, or a 2B would be fine. The darker it is, the more your lines will show when you press down on the paper. The lighter you want your lines, you'll use a lighter pressure of pencil. So this is a Ticonderoga pencil number 2. That just means it has more oil in it with the graphite, and you'll get a darker color. The lower the number, the lighter it is usually. The higher the number and the HB, or the B oil quality, the darker it will be. You'll also need to have some newsprint paper or some sort of light sketch paper. I'll show you what that looks like. I have a sketchbook, perhaps. I'm using newsprint for this one, so you can see here. And I'm going to be using that as my sketch paper. And it doesn't have to be this, it could be any paper that you have available, is fine. Also a watercolor or a thicker paper, and I'll show you what I have here. So I have some watercolor paper. I've trimmed some of it to be a little bit smaller so I could do my practice on here with the oil pastel to see how it works with the paper. And I also have a larger sheet of paper here that I will be using as my actual sketching, my actual finished piece, where I use my, everything comes together for my project. Let's see what else, if we have any other materials. That's about it. So we're going to go right into this. I have my reference material, and I'm going to switch my camera position so you can see what I'm doing as I'm talking. So, right here. Okay, so I'll just turn that way. Adjust myself here a little bit. So you can see everything. You can see me too. So I have my reference material, which is right here. And I have this cute little bird, and I've got my pencils ready. And I'm going to get my sketch paper here. And I'm just going to eyeball that bird shape here. And I'm going to think about how that looks on my paper. So I'm going to do a circle for the head, a little line for the little triangle for the beak. And I'm not too worried about how this is going to look on my sketching. I might even use the side of my pencil to kind of really like explore the shape of that bird. And give it some tail feathers, maybe a leg. I'm not worried about how it feels, like if it's perfect. Getting those lines, there's where the eye is. This helps me to see where all the elements of the bird are. Does it have to be perfect? No, not at all. But what you're just trying to do is get the idea, the feel of it, and maybe even explore different parts of the bird so that you can do mirroring a little bit and blending of those two together, just to kind of get a feel for the paper, as well as just to get an idea of what you want to put on your final piece. So here I have my rough sketch. I'm going to go ahead and get my sketch paper now. And what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to pick out some colors that mimic the bird that I have here. And here I have my little practice sheet of watercolor paper. It doesn't have to be the same paper that you use for your sketching. You want something a little more durable because oil pastel does have oil in it and it will spread into the paper. So with watercolor, you'll have this sort of resistance and compared to your newsprint or your sketch paper. So here I'm going to pick out a few different colors of my oil pastels and maybe some yellows, I have some yellows in the bird, some browns, the ochre, white. I have obviously a lot of green in the background. So I'm going to think about how that works. Here's some green. And let's see, maybe a blue. And why I use blue is that I don't see a blue color. I know that there's blue in the shadows. And what that does is gives the illusion of a shadow and depth. So you're not like leaving your painting or your oil pastel flat. So I'm going to take my pencil. I'm just going to do maybe for my practice, I'll do a circle shape, a sphere. And I'm going to think about the shadows and the lights. I'm going to start with a brown color and see how that feels. I notice that it sits on the paper more and it doesn't go into it. It's called resisting. So you're doing this feeling of light and dark, but also the oil pastel, the material itself is actually resisting going into the paper, which is nice for other types of mediums. If we did a watercolor, if we added watercolor to this, we would actually be filling in all those gaps with water, actual water and pigment, and making the two separate. It would keep it separated, so you have this really cool contrast. An example of that would be where I have a watercolor added to my oil pastel, and you can see how it resisted the lighter colors when I added the watercolor on top of this. We're not going to do this in this one just because we're just going to play with the colors and blending those two. So here I have the darker brown. I added a lighter brown on top of that. I'm using the side of my oil pastel, and I'm just going to blend those two together. I'm using a white now. I'm going to see how that works to blend those two. You can see how it really smooths out those colors. Here's a rougher view. When I add the white on top of that, it really smooths it out. It lightens it up too, but it really gives you a nice smooth feel. I'm going to add some green. See how that looks. And I'm going to pause for a second.
Don't come home until.
Okay, so I went and I got some paper towels just to show you how that feels. I'm going to add my green. Just going to do a little bit all over here, maybe for the bottom of my sphere. And let's see what happens when I take my paper towel. And I'm just going to wrap that on my finger. I'm just going to blend those with my fingers. See how that feels and looks. Wow, that really fills in a lot of those gaps and really smooths it out. You can get this nice soft edge here and a darker one towards the sphere. Now, I was talking about shadowing. To add some blues to this on the bottom. Let's see how that looks. It's a nice sharp line, but I'm going to take some of that green on my paper towel. Maybe I'll just wrap it around again and just blend those in. So a nice soft blending here. A lot of artists do this with their illustrations. So it's a really nice technique. And you can kind of fade it out a little bit, pull it out, the color, and you can see how it really kind of softens it up, gives it a nice feel to the piece. So I just use a paper towel, standard paper towel. I'm using that for that blending. I'm going to go back to my yellows, and I'm going to add some of that to my sphere, maybe going into some of that blending. Notice how cakey this is, and more of a soft look here, more of a soft pastel. There's pastels that don't have any yellow in them, and with that, any oil in them. And what they do is they're more of a powdery feel, so it can get really messy easily. And you usually use a fixative, like even some people use hairspray to make it stay. A fixative means that it won't move around, but if you left it to its own devices, it will spread around. Oil pastel doesn't do that, which is why I prefer it myself. But I'm going to blend these here. Notice it's not spreading everywhere around, just tiny bits, maybe where my oil pastel hit the paper. I'm going to keep blending this with my paper towel, and I'm just going to go around here until I get all of these edges in. And I can go over this again to make it more of a cakey feel if I like that, or I can use the paper towel to kind of play with this. So this is a really nice attempt at doing a sphere. I have a little bit of a shine there to kind of emphasize the light source, some shadows, just to get a feel for shadow work, and a little bit of under the sphere to give it that curved feel. So we have our example here. Now I'm going to go and think about putting all of these things together now. I have my practice for my oil pastel. I practice doing my sketching with my bird here and my reference. I'm going to get my bigger piece of paper, and I'm going to play with this now. So I have my bigger piece of paper, and I'm going to think about referencing my sketchwork. I used the whole surface of my paper. I added another bird to this element, and I did that because I wanted to see maybe adding, instead of just one bird like the original one, maybe I'll add two. I'll try that. I think I'm going to try that. So I have my reference on hand if I need it. It's back here. And I have my actual sketch, and I have a big surface here for my birds, and I'm just going to start playing with this here. Thinking about where I want to place it. Maybe I'll have two birds, one looking up at the other one. Maybe they're talking to each other. This one comes off the page a little bit. For the eyes, I'm using the side of my pencil so that I have more of a light touch. So that maybe I don't want my pencil work to show. If I want my pencil work to show, I'll press harder on the paper. But right now, I just want to keep it very simple and light. So I have a branch here, the legs. So I'm going to put his feet there. The branch is off the paper. If I were to add watercolor later on, I would want to think about leaving a little bit of a border just to secure it with tape so that it won't warp. I'm just going to add a few more lines here. I'm not doing too much with the pencil because I want to keep it light. Okay, so now I have my basic sketch. I'm going to think about adding my colors that I've chosen here. And I'm going to think about going back to the original piece reference so I can see the colors. Just going to go with the side of my oil pastel. Maybe I'll pull off some of that paper so that I have a little bit more color to work with, a little more pigment. Anytime I have a little drop of color, I can just blend it in like that and see where it is. I'm not going to worry too much about too much of the colors. And I'm just going to go over it lightly. And this one here, same thing. Maybe a similar type of bird. Now I have some darks in here. Maybe I'll pull out a few of the darker colors. Let's see, some black. Where is that? I have white out already, and we have dark brown right here. Okay, so now I'm going to think about the wings, where those darker pieces are of the bird. I'm just doing this as a zigzag line, kind of give me a rough guide. For this one here too. Imagining where the wings of this bird would be. And then I'm going to think about maybe adding some blues for those shadows that I can't see with my eye, but I know are there and psychologically. So it helps it look more realistic. And I give it a little more dimension. Okay. Some blues there. I know there's some under here. Maybe some right there. And for the other bird, the same thing. All the way over here. And so I have this sort of rough sketch of my other bird down here, and I'm going to keep adding some more of the lighter yellows and colors. Maybe some yellows here. And if it turns a different color, that's perfectly fine. You can add color on top of it, which means like if I'm getting a greenish tone right here when I touch that, you see a little bit of a green here. I'm not too worried about it. I'm just going to keep working it because what it does is it adds more interest to it. Plus the background is really, really green on my piece. So you'll have more of a nice picking up of those highlights that you would catch from a real background like that. So I'm adding some of the little legs, the branches here, adding a little bit of the bead color. Doesn't have to match up perfectly. So I'm just going to add this here for some of that, little blending a little bit. A little bit more here. Just going to cross that. So I'm going back to my paper towel now. I'm going to think about blending some of those colors. This is the fun part where you can kind of experiment a little bit with the color and pick up some of those natural highlights. So I'm blending it, really smoothing it out, giving that nice little color of the bird. And I can go back and add some more details. So this is a nice soft look. There we go. I really like that. I'm going to do the branch now, a little bit of that one. Again, if I want it to be a thicker line or a thicker dimension with the oil pastel, I'll just go back over it with some of the oil pastels that has a richer, cakey feel to it. So make sure you're changing your paper towel because once you start really blending, you're going to get a lot of color on there. And some artists actually like it when it gets a little bit thicker with color and get some unexpected results, which really that becomes art because that's how you make something new and original. So I have a little bit of that green in there, and that's fine. I like that little highlight. So now I'm going to add some black to kind of pop out some of the details and the eyes. For the eyes, I'm going to make a little circle around there. And I notice there's a little shine in the eye. So I'm going to leave a little bit of that white in there. Not too bad. And I'm going to add some details with the beak. Go around, maybe has some speckles here. And some of the dark in the wing. Notice I'm adding the black last because that's sort of the finishing touch with oil pastels. You really want to get those soft feels first so that you're not like overwhelming your piece. And let's see, it's got little legs that have some dark on it. I notice right here. Toes, branch, and I'm not going to put dark black where the blue is because the blue is on its own is a shadow. I'm going to add an eye here. Have this one looking up at you. Maybe his nose is this way, the beak is that way, and a little bit on top, some speckles as well, some shadows with the darker black. Pop those highlights out. And I have some whites that I lost in this one here. I'll see about blending a few of that in to kind of pop it out a little bit. And I think a little bit of highlight around the eye. Okay. Let's see this one. I kind of like a little more yellow here. So adding some yellow on top of that. Underneath the bird and on his tails. There. Okay. This feels pretty good to me. Maybe a little more yellow there. I'm going to think about that background now. And I have my green oil pastel. I'm just going to use the side of it, go all the way around, and flipping my paper around. I don't try to keep it in one spot. Maybe I'll keep adding it around here to fill up this area. Now, if I had thought about I could have had added maybe some flowers here for my composition. For now, I'm gonna leave them open. And I'm going over my pencil lines. Notice a lot of the pencil lines have disappeared at this point, just because of adding those colors. And I noticed that the branch, I forgot I had a few leaves. I'll add some green leaves here. And maybe I don't want them to be just flat looking like that. I'll add a darker green. Let's see which one we have here. Some dark green, and maybe kind of blend it in there a little bit. Maybe add a couple of darker trimmed ones, just to give it some visual interest and play with it a little bit. You never know how that's going to feel. And going back over with that green, blending a few leaves in there, it really pops it out. So I'm just going to keep doing that, blending it. And with the background, I'm going to take a clean piece of paper towel and maybe try blending those a little bit, just to kind of see how that works to soften it up. Oh, I like that. Okay, so play with the paper towels and blending with your oil pastel so you can get a nice feel of variations of color, and just to see, cover up those pencil lines too. It helps to like really bring everything together, blend it all together. It looks lovely. So just keep having fun with that. That's until I get most of it done. You have to put a bit of pressure on here, so you're not doing a very light touch. So hold down your piece so you don't crumple it, and do small batches. It's not all over. Just little circles, little rubbings, see how it feels. Also, what's nice about this is if you have any loose pieces of oil pastel, like right here, I have one. You can pick it up with a paper towel like that. Or if you wanted to actually try experimenting and seeing how it blends in there, you can do that too. And that's another option as well. Let's say I don't like this part right here. I can just go over it a little bit with the oil pastel, and I can blend that in to make it integrate better. Okay. So at this point, I would say this piece is finished. If I wanted to go back and add some flowers, I can do that. And I would sign it with my name, initials, something like this. And then I would be done with, I would turn this in and I would say, this is my piece, I'm done. Thank you for this lesson. I hope that helped. I hope you learned a lot as well. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Goodbye. Oh, one last thing I forgot, never leave your tools out. Always make sure to clean up when you're done. I know that sounds like it's an obvious thing. Sometimes we forget, but we need to make sure we clean up our area when we're done. As an artist, that's really important. So make sure you put everything back where they go, and clean up any like little bits of oil pastel that are on your table, any pieces of paper, gather those up and put them away in the trash. That way, when you go back to your art studio area, you'll be able to work immediately, and you won't have to worry about other things that are around. Also, it shows your family that you care about your environment, which is super important. And we want to make sure that we leave a nice, clean space around us. Okay, well, thank you so much. Bye-bye.